Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What in the World is Happening, the show about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. I'm here today with Mitch Williams, my guest from Canton, Illinois. Hi, Mitch.
Hi, Sabina. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the program.
You're welcome. And today we're going to be talking about Maitreya's priorities and universal basic income. This is something people are talking about a lot right now. It's in the news very frequently. I'll just say that I'm broadcasting live from Edmonton, Canada, and we do this show every second and fourth Saturday of the month. And at the end, we're going to do 30 minutes of transmission meditation. It's free. It's for everybody over the age of 12, and we ask you to participate. Stick around. You might really like it. So, Mitch, you're going to tell us a lot today about universal basic income, right?
As much as we have time for, yes.
Yeah, I know you've been doing a lot of reading about this, and we just want to say we welcome questions at any point during the program. Please do send us your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as best that we can. So, how do you want to introduce this?
Well, let's talk about UBI first of all, universal basic income. The three components are, first of all, that it's universal, which means that it's a payment that goes to everyone within a particular population group. Basic means that it's enough to cover an individual or a family's basic needs. A lot of times it's done at or around the poverty level or just above it. And the income part is that it's a payment, a cash payment that goes out unconditionally to everybody in the group.
Right. So it's actually a form of social security, right?
More or less, yeah. Although people do tend to think of it in different terms, not just as a social security, but a kind of a wealth sharing kind of an approach to economics. It's even seen, and we'll get into this more later, but it's seen as a kind of a support for a capitalist system of free market, giving everyone the ability to participate in the market.
Exactly. That's really important. And people forget sometimes that we all need to have purchasing power in order to keep the whole process going, right? I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
The whole exchange of goods and services requires that, if we're doing it on the basis of money, at any rate, like as we are now. There are other I've seen a lot of these they've popped up in recent years. Excuse me. Some places call it a time bank. Other places call it a barter or exchange program, where people will sign up and offer services. And when for example, you've cut somebody's hair, then you've earned maybe 1 hour of services. And then you can ask for example, someone to come and prune your hedge for an hour in exchange.
Yeah.
So there are other ways. Yeah.
We forget that money is really just an artificial means that we've come up with to elicit exchange between ourselves. And it's not necessarily the only way.
Exactly. So really the operative word here is exchange, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And before we go on, we want to just give a little background to where we're coming from. We talk often about this transition between the ages, the fact that we're at this moment right now of a major sort of historic, really, change in the types of energies that are streaming into our planet and the way that they're impacting us. The age of Pisces, those energies stimulated our individuality, idealism, and devotion. And right now we're receiving the energies of Aquarius in growing potency. And those energies are stimulating group work, the idea of synthesis, coming together, and the ability to make things real, to ground them on the physical plane. And I think we are seeing really this kind of shift a lot in the way people are responding to events. We're seeing a huge upswelling of group action, group, people coming together as groups and calling for change as groups. I remember when one of the school shootings had taken place in the United States, and a young boy from that school went public and said, thoughts and prayers are not enough. We need action. And that to me showed the energies of Aquarius, this desire and need to make things real on the physical plane.
Yeah, I think that's the major aspect of this shift, is that we're moving from individual consciousness, which is what the last 2,000 years has been about. And it served its purpose. We have developed very strong individuality as human beings, and we've actually done it a little too well. And now we need to shift to taking that individuality and use it in for the good of the group.
That's right. Now, I'm sorry this slide seems to have shifted over to the right a bit, but we wanted to mention where our sources of information when we talk about these things like the change of ages, what that implies, the types of energies, and these are the main teachers or proponents of this information in the West. And we mostly, excuse me, we mostly use information that Benjamin Creme has shared with us through his articles, lectures, and books. But the other three people on the screen have also given an enormous amount of information. And all of these people, where did they get their information? They got their information from people who are more evolved in terms of their evolution, people who we now call masters of wisdom. And before we talk about the masters of wisdom, we like to say that all people, in fact, all life forms are divine. That's how we see it, that there's a quality of intelligence and awareness in all life. And specifically now talking about people, this is something we all share, this consciousness. And the real difference between us, one to the other, perhaps, is how we express it, how we show it, how much of it we're able to express, and in which ways we do that. And when we talk about the masters of wisdom, we're talking about people who are able to express more of this. They have become capable of expressing all of their divinity in terms of what's possible on earth. And so we call them masters of wisdom because they have this level of mastery over themselves. They form part of a group that we call the spiritual hierarchy. Simply, that just means it's a group of people at a higher level of evolution, that is, they've evolved more. It doesn't mean they're better people in the sense, it's not a value judgment. It's simply a question of how much they know and can do. We also call them the lords of compassion. They've experienced everything there is to experience on earth. They've been us. I mean, we are them in the sense that we are who they were before. They are who we will be. So that's part of this teaching, which we call the Ageless Wisdom Teaching, which says we're all evolving constantly and moving towards a complete mastery over ourselves. In that sense, they're perfect. For us, they're perfect. Now they continue to evolve because there is no end to that process. They've completed their evolution on Earth. They don't need to reincarnate anymore, as we do. And the big news is they're returning to guide us openly. They've always been here, but they have been hidden from our view. They've been living in remote places on the Earth, mostly because we weren't ready to work with them. But we've reached a point where we are, in fact, ready. And perhaps also we've reached a point where we need their help in the sense of guidance, simply because we're capable now of destroying ourselves. And that's a very kind of very, very risky place to be if you don't also have the wisdom to manage that.
Sabina, if I can interject real quickly,
yeah, for sure.
Idea that we are divine, that our essence is divine, is kind of an important point in terms of our conversation today, because our whole purpose for incarnating as human beings is to develop more and more of that divinity. And of course, the masters are the ones who have completed that process and are perfected from the human perspective, at least. And therefore they can serve as guides and teachers for the rest of us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like having an elder brother or a parent, somebody who just has been around longer, knows more, and can help you out. And then we like to talk about one of these masters called Maitreya. That's his name. And he's the person who is predicted by all the world's religions that he will return at a later time. And he has the function of being the head of this group. So he's a bit more advanced, say, than the rest of them. But his purpose really is he embodies unconditional love. That's what he is emanating. It flows from him and it flows to all of us. So we're connected. very intimately, you could say, with Maitreya through our hearts, through this love energy, unconditional love. And we're also connected with all of the masters, whether we believe that or not. It's a fact that on the inner planes, all of humanity is part of an emerging group. We are joining the spiritual hierarchy. So Maitreya is expected by all the world's major religions. He will be with us, that is, openly with us, working with us, during the next age, the age of Aquarius, which is a long time, 2,250 years. And he's simply waiting for us to ask him to make a public announcement, to announce himself. And that'll come through the world's media.
And, you know, the invitation, I think, is also relevant to our conversation today, because Maitreya is simply waiting for us to be ready for the messages that he will be sharing with us. And according to our readiness and our expectancy, he perceives that as an invitation to some degree. And so by looking for guidance, by looking for something more and moving towards what the priorities that he will espouse, we are literally preparing and creating that invitation for him and the masters.
I think that's a really good way to put it. And expectancy, I think this is a huge word, and it's connected to hope. And that's something I'm seeing a lot of these days. The awareness of the crises we're facing is much greater, perhaps, than in the past. We have access to so much information, but the level of hope is also greater. People are much more aware in a heightened way of how necessary it is to make changes. And so I think that that feeling of expectancy is really growing. And we like to talk about his priorities, as you mentioned, Mitch, because these are really important. This is really, in a way, it explains who he is and who the masters are. These essential services or needs, these are things that we all share. And repair of the environment is something that we now know we can't live without. We can't continue to just take from Mother Earth without keeping in mind that the Earth is a living being, and her survival or its survival is intimately tied to ours. And all of the life forms who inhabit the Earth, we share this space with them, and we depend on them. And we're now aware of that. We've learned enough to understand that.
Yeah, and this goes back to the main point that we are divine beings in physical form, taking incarnation in physical form, and the whole point of doing so is to manifest more and more of our divinity through our mental, emotional, and physical human forms. And in order to do that, we need an environment that is conducive to that creative process. If we're focused totally on survival, it's very hard to turn our attention to our spiritual development. And that's the whole point of being here. So in order for that to take place more widely, we have to address the systems that are preventing that currently.
Yeah, and that right now, the systems that we're living in, the systems we've created, are basically in opposition to this possibility of each person being able to express that divine inner reality and having the opportunity to do that. Right now, you could say really that what we have is a system that's based on greed, on competition, qualities that don't lead to everybody having enough. They lead to this kind of situation where you see a child searching through a huge pile of garbage. So we have a lot to change.
One way that I like to think of it is that, if we are truly spiritual beings, and that is our essential essence, our reality, our material form side is really more or less illusory. It's not as real as our actual identity, which is spiritual. And if we approach life from a materialistic perspective, we're actually not honoring our inner reality of being spiritual beings. And so the ideal is for our outer material reality to reflect that inner spiritual identity. And the systems that we use for life and governing and economics in the world need to begin to reflect that inner reality.
And really what you're saying is that we're all connected. We share this inner reality. And so we need to also implement sharing on the outer planes as well.
Yes, at the level of our divinity, our soul, if you will, at the soul level, we are not separate individualities. We are group conscious, and it's that inner soul consciousness that we're moving towards and beginning to hopefully manifest more and more of in the outer world and in our individual lives.
And so the reason we want to talk about universal basic income is we think it can address these needs and this need to share, to reflect outwardly what we know is the inner reality. But it hasn't yet been implemented at a national level in any country comprehensively, though there have been many experiments done with it, and there are still many experiments going on right now. It's also something that's gaining a lot of support as more people know about the idea and people talk about it. It starts to make more and more sense.
Yeah, there have been trials done with universal basic income, or UBI for short, going back at least as far as the late 1700s. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming more and more popular, as you said, around the world. It was proposed by Thomas More back in the 1500s. The pandemic that we've just been through has really brought to the surface and made it unavoidably clear how our current systems are not serving us very well. Our political systems, our economic systems, they're doing very well for a very small percentage of the population. You know, right. Those ultra rich elites who are capitalizing on what's going on. Since the pandemic, for example, the top elites in the United States have increased their net worth by several $billion more than they had before, while a big percentage of the population has been driven into unemployment. And so we see that acting out because of the pandemic. It wasn't caused by the pandemic, but it's being made clear that these systems are not working for the majority of us very well.
So there's a real lack of resilience in the systems, and the fact that they're not even set up with the aim of working for everybody. I mean, really, these systems have been set up by the people who benefit from them the most in order for these people to continue benefiting the most. I mean, it's a rigged game, in fact.
Yes, absolutely. And universal basic income or some type of a guaranteed income is one possible way that we can address these inequalities and inequities in the current systems. And it's interesting because it has in the past been supported not only by people on the political left, but also on the right as well. And we'll get into that a little more in a bit.
And so the fact that we're able to say it eliminates poverty, reduces wealth and income inequality, et cetera, we can say this because the experiments with UBI, or universal basic income, have already taken place. People have tried this over periods of years in different communities around the world, and the results have come in. So this is based on actual real life. It's not just a proposition or a theory at this point.
Yeah, I want to point out that, you know, one of the major problems that we are experiencing right now is we are at historic levels of wealth and income inequality, and wealth and income inequality are linked to a whole myriad series of extreme social problems, not just poverty, but increased crime rate, obesity, mental illness, teenage pregnancies, homicide rates, drug use, health issues are much, much worse when you have extremes of income inequality. And when you address that income and wealth inequality, you address all of those social ills. And people are healthier, they have less stress in their lives, and there's a whole long slew of positive benefits that come out of implementing a basic income.
Well, it's interesting because you'd think that on some level this would be so obvious. If you look at a garden, if you don't give your plant water, if it doesn't have proper soil, it won't grow well. It won't thrive. It'll look sickly. It won't be able to produce fruit. It just won't function the way it's meant to. And we're so much more complex than a plant, and our needs are actually quite simple if you really think about what we need in order to thrive. It's not complicated. And yet, until now, this hasn't really been, I guess it's been recognized. It's not that we don't know about it. It's just that there's never been a sufficient push, a pushback almost, you could say, against those who hold the reins of power or who maintain the system the way it is in order to put something else in place.
Yeah, a part of it is that we've had two different ways of approaching our social needs, and politically it's the left and the right. On the left, generally, we think of the attempt to take care of people. On the right, we think of personal responsibility and personal accountability and the freedom to pursue your own interests, and the idea that by doing so, everybody succeeds together. And of course, each of these perspectives have a certain amount of value to them, but we need to find ways to integrate them so that we're not at odds with each other, and so we're able to, be able to make things work effectively for everyone.
Well, yeah, it seems that it should be possible. But I understand what you're getting at here. You're talking about the fact that there's such a difference in the ways that people look at problems, or how they perceive what the cause is or what the solution is. And yet you've said that UBI, or Universal Basic Income, has supporters both on the left and the right politically. Now, I find that fascinating because it means on some level there's an agreement there between people who very often don't agree.
Yes, and people support UBI for often vastly different reasons, interestingly. On the left, it goes pretty closely with the idea of social benefit, of taking care of people and making sure that nobody falls below the line of basic support. On the right, it's perceived as a way to allow everyone to participate in the free market. It's a way to make sure that that the capitalistic kind of systems that we have are supported from the bottom up instead of only from the top down, which has been proven to not work very well. We have, like I said, some of the greatest wealth inequality in history right now, and it comes with all those various social ills. So the more the system is skewed and set up to benefit only the people at the top, the worse that becomes. And ultimately that's unsustainable, because in every society where this great wealth inequality has taken place, eventually people revolt. They're not going to put up with it indefinitely. And so it's not sustainable indefinitely. And so it really behooves everyone, whether you're on the left or the right, to look into this, a way to make sure that we don't have these extremes of wealth inequality, but that everyone has the means to participate in the economy and to live their lives in a way that is reasonable and fulfilling.
So you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the objections that there have been to UBI, correct?
Yes. One of the ones that you hear, especially on the right, is that if you just give people money, that employment levels will drop. People won't want to work. But all the experiments seem to indicate that this actually isn't true. Now, it is true in some of the current social welfare systems, which are tied to some kind of a condition. If you if you have to show that you don't have a certain level of employment in order to get the benefit, then it disincentivizes the urge to be higher employed. Whereas if it's unconditional, if there are none of those conditions tied to the basic income, this isn't the case. And every experiment has shown this. In most of the experiments, the employment levels have either stayed the same or even gone up a little bit. In a recent experiment with basic income in Stockton, California, during the pandemic, the group that was given the basic income payments, their employment levels they went up by 12%, which is about twice the amount of the control group that didn't receive the income payments.
Impressive.
Yes, yeah. It's pretty amazing. And in one experiment after another, the only groups who show a decrease in their employment levels are, first of all, young people who are still in school. They elected not to work so that they could finish a degree or get a work certification or basically get training that would help them to be better employed. And the other group was new mothers who elected to stay home longer with their children. And each of these are things that in the long run contribute greatly to not only social good, but to the overall economic good of our society as well. So, in every case, that idea that people won't want to work is not borne out by the results of the experiments.
I'm so glad that we have actual results to talk about, because that gives the whole conversation a different type of weight, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The next objection that people have is it would be too expensive. And there are many different approaches to basic income, and the financing there are a lot of different ideas about how to finance it. And we haven't done a program at a national level across the board enough to really have a complete idea of how this will work. But we have enough of the experiments to kind of tell, at least to have a basic idea. And essentially what we're finding is that the benefits from a basic income far outweigh the cost factors. In fact, by one estimate, the cost to society and to government of poverty is almost twice what it would take to create a basic income that would support people at a level at or slightly above the poverty level. And so,
sorry, I just want to jump in and say, when you talk about the costs of poverty, I find that's fascinating, because usually when people think about poverty, they only think about the person who's suffering poverty, what that person is experiencing as a cost, if you could put it like that. But in fact, the costs are societal, right? Because people in poverty need help, and people in poverty aren't able to function in an optimal way. And so all kinds of different difficulties ensue that at some level and at some moment in time have to be taken care of by society, by the rest of us, right?
Well, yeah, just one simple but very, very important example is that people in poverty have extreme issues with poor health. Health levels are much worse, and because they don't have the means for healthcare oftentimes, when they do go into the healthcare system, they put an undue strain on the healthcare system, and that ends up costing all of us as a result. And there are many, many, many other examples of how that's true, how the cost of poverty is extreme on society as a whole and on our governments as well.
Wow, lots to think about there.
Yeah, and then the objection that most people find most objectionable, I guess, or kind of the hardest one to get over is that it's not politically viable. Now, people on the left, a lot of people that I talk to, they say, well, we'll never be able to do that because the conservatives would never go for it. On the conservative side, people that at first encounter the idea oftentimes see it as a free handout, and they're opposed on political means, a political basis. But for many reasons, it actually could be politically viable. And this is borne out by some of the past experiences we've had with this. Some of the supporters have been on the right and the left and across the political spectrum. And it's really surprising the amount of people that have come out in support of a UBI or some type of basic income.
So let's look at some of these people. So these I guess you'd say probably these people would be falling more on the left politically, this list here.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that towards the end of his life, Martin Luther King shifted his main focus from racial inequality to poverty and eliminating poverty. And he, in his last book, he wrote that he believed that the solution was to give everyone a basic income. And he felt strongly about that. And yeah, all of these other people have at one time or another been strongly supportive of a basic income. Now, that's kind of to be expected, the people on the left.
Right.
For the basic income.
Should we go to the next list then?
Sure.
Okay.
Pope Francis is maybe a bit on the left too, and Stephen Hawking, but some of these others, Milton Friedman, for those of you that aren't familiar with who he was, he's considered by many to be the father of modern Western neoliberalism and free market capitalism. He had a profound effect on Western governments, the Nixon administration, the Reagan administration, and the Margaret Thatcher administration in the UK, and moved them and most of the Western countries much, much further to the right in economic terms than they had been previously. Since the 80s, that has gone to extremes, and this style of so-called free market capitalism has become out of control. And
can I just jump in and just ask you, when you say move the economic system to the right, what does that actually mean?
It's based on the belief that government should have little or no part in the economy.
Okay.
Friedman believed that in order to have a free market, everyone had to have a free choice to participate and how to participate in the market. And if that were left up to government, he believed, because there was only one government, you had only one choice and you had very little freedom involved. And so he believed that the government was not a good place to put that. But what a lot of people don't know is that he was also very opposed to monopolies. And our system has become highly monopolized currently.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so the same thing applies in our current system. Our freedoms have been taken away because we don't have choice, which is what he said was so essential. And he also said in order to have a free market, everybody had to have the ability to participate in the market. And poverty prevents that from being true. And so he proposed a type of basic income that he called a negative income tax, where people below a certain point, a certain income level, would not pay taxes in, they would get taxes back. And so they would get a basic income. And current analysts of Friedman's work agree that without this basic income, all of his other arguments of free market capitalism pretty much fall apart. And so
and yet we've applied all of those ideas, but not this particular part of it, right?
Exactly. We also haven't done anything to do away with monopolies. So those two things are absolutely foundational to the ideas that Friedman proposed. And so it's really crucial that we look at the other elements of his work because he was so influential. Another big surprise for me was Nixon. Richard Nixon was a conservative president in the United States, but he had a dream of eliminating poverty. And he was highly influenced by Martin Luther King and by Milton Friedman.
You know,
And
that's something I had no idea about Nixon.
he proposed a form of basic income, and it came very, very close to actually passing. He came up with a plan for giving everyone a basic income, and it was proposed, and it actually went to Congress, and it passed in the House and came extremely close to passing in the Senate. And the only reason it didn't was because there were a few Democrats who didn't think that it went far enough. And so
Oh my goodness.
it didn't pass. They came up with a slightly less potent version a year or so later and had similar results. It passed in the House and came very close, but didn't pass in the Senate. And Nixon was very much in favor of this. And there's a long story about what happened in the Nixon administration that we don't really have time to go into right now, but it's really fascinating, the whole story behind it, and how he very nearly became the president that alleviated poverty in the United States. And most people believe, most of the analysts believe that if that had happened, that other countries would quickly have followed suit, and we would be living in a very, very different world now.
So really then the question is, why hasn't it happened since the time of Nixon? Why hasn't anybody else pushed for that?
Well, you know, when Nixon was discredited in the Watergate scandal, people forgot about his work on behalf of basic income. And then because of Milton Friedman's influence on the Reagan administration, everything was pushed to the right in economic terms. And that's where we ended up.
Right. So we just kind of lost sight of this whole possibility.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah. Well, and then we've got some more people here to talk about who are also supporters of universal basic income.
Some of these are very surprising too. James Baker and
Yeah.
George Shultz were Republican Treasury secretaries, also very in favor of UBI. Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart and Sam's Club, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, a whole bunch of different Silicon Valley executives. One of the ideas, and Andrew Yang was on the previous slide, he ran for president with a type of UBI as the centerpiece in his platform. But he and other high-tech executives believe that eventually technology is going to eliminate a lot of jobs, so that everybody having a job will no longer be a viable option. And so they're proposing some type of a universal basic income as a solution to that. And they're also
I'd like to jump in. Sorry, Mitch, I just want to jump in with a quote from Jerry Brown, who was the governor of California.
Yes,
just
please.
On what you were just saying. Jobs for every American is doomed to failure because of modern automation and production. We ought to create an income maintenance system so every single American has the dignity and the wherewithal for shelter, basic food, and medical care. So just that idea that the way we're going technologically is going to lead to the elimination of the majority of jobs.
Yes, and this also reflects the information that we've gotten from the masters, who basically envision the world in very different terms once more of our divinity is beginning to manifest. And one of the first steps forward is being able to do so in ways that are moving us in that direction, that are more beneficent for everyone as a whole. And of course, universal basic income is one way that we could be implementing that almost immediately, given the right political support behind it. And I think the only real obstacle to my mind is just informing people on how UBI really addresses these political ideas across the political spectrum from left to right.
Right, so that would also include clearing up the objections people might have and showing that they're not, in fact, there's no basis for them.
There really isn't.
Yeah. And also Antonio Guterres, who's the head of the UN right now, he said, the very nature of work will change. The governments may have to consider stronger social safety nets, and eventually universal basic income. So we have so many voices saying this. And sorry, you wanted to go ahead?
I think if we're going to move forward, we have to be able to more equitably share the resources of our planet, so that everybody can have a standard of living that is reasonable, that allows them to pursue their lives in a way that creates the conditions whereby we can begin to explore manifesting more of our innate divinity, who we are. And that's really about sharing. And Maitreya and the masters have spoken about that. This is the first prerogative, the first essential step that we need to take as humanity. The masters are not going to do this work for us. They will guide us, they will advise us, but we have to do the work of changing these systems and creating the conditions where we can move forward into the future more equitably. And sharing the resources more equitably is the first essential step in that direction. And UBI, I believe, is one way that we can begin doing so almost immediately.
Well, I like the fact that it's something that sounds so simple. I mean, it's structurally not a complicated thing to do. It's one of the transfer of funds, basically.
Yes, and one of the benefits of UBI as compared to other programs, which actually is a big selling point to people on the right, is that it's far more efficient than a lot of our current social welfare programs, because you have to prove that you need the money in the current systems. It disincentivizes work, it stigmatizes people, and it's highly necessary to have a lot of administrative oversight to make sure that people are meeting the basic criteria to get the programs. But UBI has none of that. You just give out payments to everybody, and you don't have to have administrative oversight. You don't have to have all the bureaucracy involved.
Exactly, you're not policing people. Yeah,
it leads to smaller government. It also allows people to spend their money the way they want. They can design their economic lives in the way that they see fit, which is also a conservative ideal of having freedom to do things the way we want to. So it gets government out of people's pockets and out of overseeing their way of doing things, which is a strong conservative ideal, and one of the points that conservatives and people on that side tend to see as a benefit of UBI.
Well, and I just wanted to read this. This is a quote from Benjamin Creme. Increased leisure will evoke undreamed of skills and talents, allow men and women to reach their full potential, and permit close involvement in community and national life. So really, that's what we're talking about, is that possibility of being able to unfold your talents and use them and grow and learn.
Along the same lines, I found a quotation that's really terrific. This is from Buckminster Fuller. He said, "We must do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It is a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist." So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Yeah, yes. What was I thinking about before I started focusing on earning a living? Yeah.
Yeah. And, when Benjamin Creme has said that once we are sharing the resources of the planet more equitably, there will be an explosion of creativity. people who were mainly focused on survival will suddenly have all this creative energy that they can use. And much of that will go to contributing to the betterment of good for everyone on the planet. So we will have an absolute wellspring of a creative revolution, so to speak, where people are able to really manifest more and more of their potential.
And I think that speaks to the fact that there often is this idea, I don't know if it's spoken or unspoken, conscious or unconscious, but I think there's an idea underpinning a lot of the way things are structured, an idea that people are not inherently good, or that people wouldn't naturally want to contribute to each other's well-being, that somehow that's not true. And I think that it's a huge glaring blind spot, because if you really think about how the world works, the truth is that the vast majority of us are not policed. Nobody's policing us. We're going about our lives and we're making our decisions, and everything's working. People obey traffic laws. Everything works. People pay their taxes. And I'm talking about the vast majority. Of course, there are some people who don't, but why do things work as well as they do? Given the fact that nobody's being policed to that degree, the way that we're talking about people who are in income support programs right now. And the reason it all works is because people are inherently good, in the sense that people want to make things work. They want to contribute to each other's well-being. It's innate in all of us. It's a natural thing. And so what you just said, this quote from Benjamin Creme about what will happen once we start ensuring that people's basic needs are met, it follows from that, very logically, in fact.
There's a really interesting book by Muhammad Yunus, who is known as the originator of microcredit. It's called The 3 Zeros. And his whole idea in this book is that, all of our economic systems are currently based on the idea that everybody is selfish. And so the systems are literally set up to reward selfishness and greed.
Right.
But he says that's not the reality. People are somewhat selfish, but also people are also altruistic. Right. And so we need to refine our economic systems so that they reflect that reality, so that our economic systems also reward altruism. And he has found ways of actually doing that, what he's called social businesses. These are businesses that are set up to create some social good in the world, to address some social problem in the world. And of course, they also provide a living, an income for the people that are involved in the businesses. But their main objective is solving some social issue or creating some good in the world. And that is also another way to kind of approach our economic systems from a different slant of we're all in this together instead of everybody for themselves.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I want to go now to just this quotation from Maitreya himself about why. I mean, we know why sharing is a good thing. We've been talking about that now today, talking about it in terms of universal basic income. But he makes this connection between sharing and justice, and that as long as we don't have real justice, we can never have any real peace. You mentioned earlier, Mitch, that in every society where the inequalities in wealth increase and keep increasing, there always reaches a point. It reaches a point in which people begin to protest and the whole thing falls apart, because those at the bottom won't put up with it any longer. And so there's a very real relationship between justice and peace. And you need to have real justice in order to have real peace. And we know that without peace, we're not going to last long.
Yes, well, we have the environmental issues that are getting worse and worse because of our competitive economic practices. But also, we have the weaponry to completely destroy the planet many times over. And if we don't create peace, we will, one way or another, destroy the planet. Now, Maitreya has said that he sees in our hearts what our answer is, and he's glad, and he believes that we will make the right choice. But we have to make that choice, and it begins with justice, and justice begins with sharing, because our current economic systems are completely unjust. We have a huge percentage of the population that are living in abject poverty, while these select few are usurping and hoarding mountains of wealth beyond what they could possibly utilize in many, many lifetimes worth.
Right.
This is completely unjust, and that is completely unsustainable, and it's leading to absolute disaster if we continue on that course.
Right. So that's all. These are all good arguments for sharing, right?
Absolutely.
We'd like to just mention where we get our information. We've talked about that before, but the website that you can look at if you're interested, share-international.org. There are also videos on YouTube, the Share International channel, and books and downloads at share-ecart.com. And there's the magazine. We've mentioned that, Share International Magazine. You can subscribe, and it relates the information about the Masters of Wisdom and Maitreya, their teachings, to current events, much in the same way we've been doing here today.
Just a quick note, Sabina, about Share International Magazine. Even for people who are not really as interested in the information about Ageless Wisdom and the Masters and Maitreya, I find that Share International Magazine is one of the best sources I've encountered talking about positive developments in the world and moving towards a more just system. So even from that perspective, it's got just a ton of a wealth of information on the positive things that are happening in the world and the trends that are moving us in that direction, and the things that still need to be addressed as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it gives you a different perspective on the world.
Absolutely.
And we, excuse me, we mentioned books. There are 4 of them, in fact, that are available for free download. So you can start reading right away if you're interested. All of them are full of the same type of information that we've been using or describing here today. And one of them, Transmission, a Meditation for the New Age, that leads us into the next part of this program. We will talk about this meditation. You can read about it in this book in a lot of detail if you're interested. So what is transmission meditation? Mitch, how would you describe it in a nutshell?
Well, as I said, the most important reason for incarnating as human beings is to manifest more of our divinity. And as we do so, as more of our soul energy manifests through our human mental, emotional, physical forms, as we become more soul infused, we tend to live in certain ways. And the 2 main elements of a spiritual life are meditation and service. And transmission meditation combines these 2 activities in one potent meditation.
And so it's a meditation that's done in groups. That's also a characteristic of the Aquarian age, group work. This meditation cannot be done alone. However, it's not a meditation that will interfere with any other practice that you might have. In fact, Benjamin Crumb has said that transmission meditation will enhance whatever else you're doing, any other kind of yoga, meditation, or prayer, any other kind of practice. So it's just a win-win in that sense. And as you've mentioned, Mitch, it combines service with meditation. Now, how does it combine service? What's the service part of transmission meditation?
Well, the services that we're working with the masters to bring spiritual energies into the planet that can be beneficent to the overall evolution of humanity and the world as a whole. The masters, in addition to having mastered their human qualities and being completely divinely infused, they're also those masters who have elected to stay and be part of the planetary system are custodians of all the various spiritual energies that are coming into the planet. and they take these energies and they work with and they direct the energies to where they can be most useful in the world. They withdraw them from other places. Sometimes there's too much energy in a certain situation, so they'll withdraw the energy. And they're also the great master scientists. So they understand these energies in very intricate ways. And one of the elements of many of the energies that are coming into our planet, they're cosmic energies coming from a variety of different sources. And they tend to be at such a high frequency that most of humanity can't really utilize them, and they tend to just bounce off of us. So Benjamin Krem's master created this process, or he introduced this process rather, of whereby people can act as stepping down units, kind of like a transformer. And basically in the process of transmission meditation, the masters direct energy through the participants, through the various energy centers in their body. And it acts like a transformer and steps these energies down to usable levels. And then the masters are able to direct those energies to wherever they're most useful in the world. And by participating in transmission meditation, we are thereby serving the plan of evolution on our planet by allowing these energies to be transmitted through us and step down to a usable level, and then directed to wherever they can be most useful. And in the process, we also kind of our own energy centers are stepped up, and it's kind of like a forcing process whereby we are speeding up our own spiritual evolution, kind of as a side effect. So we're serving, we're meditating, and we're increasing our own spiritual development as well.
Well, and Benjamin Krem has said that 1 year of consistent transmission meditation will bring about the same types of results in terms of a person's evolution of consciousness as 10 years of regular, normal solo meditation would. So it is extremely potent.
It is very potent, yes.
The only word of caution, really, that he's given us is if you have a pacemaker, don't do this. Because of the energies are so strong. And also if you are emotionally unstable, it can sort of make those imbalances more. But for everybody else, it's absolutely safe and extremely simple as well. So how do you actually do it? We start by saying a great mantra called the Great Invocation, which we'll get to in a second. We say that together. And then the instructions are simply to hold your attention at this spot between your eyebrows right here. This is one of the chakras or energy centers that we all have. It's called the Ajna center. And you simply hold your attention here, and the energies will flow through this chakra. If you notice that your attention wanders, which it will, then you simply say Om mentally, not with your voice, but just in your mind. And that will bring your attention back to this spot. And I want to just mention one more thing, and that is you don't have to believe in anything to do this meditation. That is, you don't have to believe in any of the things we've been talking about, the Masters of Wisdom or Maitreya or the idea of divinity. You don't have to believe in meditation. It's simply a process that you can do, like taking up a sport. You can just try it out, and you'll see for yourself what it feels like, how it affects you, whether you like it or not. And here's the Great Invocation. It's been translated into many languages around the world. There are transmission groups all over the world currently meditating together. Since the pandemic started, people have turned to the internet, to the online way of connecting, just as we're doing this talk today using those means, the internet. People also meditate together using generally Zoom. And so there are many Zoom transmission meditation groups in operation right now. If you look in the chat, you'll see the links to connect to them. Many different days of the week, different times. Of course, you can create your own group. If you live together with other people, 3 people is the minimum number needed to form a group. And it can be as large as you like. So it's a very straightforward thing to do. We encourage you to join us today. And if you like it, check out some of these other groups that you could join on a regular basis.
I just want to say that in order for this to take place, we simply need to link up mentally. And we do that by keeping the focus here at the Ajna Center, that point between the eyebrows. And everything else is taken care of for us by the masters. They automatically will do the work of transmitting the exact amount of energy that is most effective. And so it's very, very simple.
And I maybe wasn't clear when I talked about these Zoom groups. Prior to the pandemic, people would meet together at somebody's house or in a bookstore to meditate. And nobody at that time thought that they could do it using the internet, for example. The only instructions about when you couldn't go and meet your group, for example, if you still wanted to connect, you could do it, as Mitch said, mentally. Like perhaps I had to stay home for some reason. So I could, if I know my group's meditating at 7 o'clock, I could sit down and I could say the great invocation, focus here, and I could mentally connect with my group, visualize my group. However, now that no one can go and meet each other, or very few people can, we're doing it using Zoom, and we find it works just as well, which is really quite wonderful.
Yes,
so,
yes. There's maybe slightly more potency when you're meeting in person, but as long as we have the mental link, that's all that's really necessary.
That's right. And I just want to say before we start the meditation, if you think there's anyone who would benefit from knowing about this story, the things we've been talking about today, please share this video with them. It might give a person hope, and also just other avenues of what kind of activism or connection they could make with folks out there. Mitch, would you like to say the great invocation today?
Sure.
So Mitch will say it out loud. We can all say it out loud, but I'll mute out. And so wherever you are, please join us. And we'll meditate for half an hour. And of course, you're welcome to continue meditating for longer if you like it. And at the end, we'll just say goodbye. So now we'll start.
From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
And that was transmission meditation. If this information resonates for you, please share it widely. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank Mitch for being with us today and just delving into this topic so knowledgeably. Thanks very much. And I'd like to thank our tech crew, John in Montgomery and Cielito in Seattle. We'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about transmission meditation. In fact, we'll be going into much more detail. So please do join us then. And thanks for being here today. Bye-bye.